So this video is going to be looking at the biological explanation of OCD, and it's going to be focusing on the evaluation. So we're going to be looking at studies really that show whether there is a genetic explanation or there isn't a genetic explanation for OCD. The first study we're going to look at was conducted by Nestedat. And Nestedat looked at 80 OCD patients, and in all he had 343 of their first relatives. So that's not 343 for each person, but across the 80 people who had OCD, he had that many first relatives. In addition, he had a control group, so 73 normal people without any mental disorder and 300 of their relatives as well. And by first relatives, we mean their parents or brothers or sisters, so close family. And what he found was that there is a very strong family link with OCD, and that if one of your first degree relatives had it, you were 5 times more likely to have OCD. So this really suggests that there must be a strong genetic link between OCD and your genes, because if one close family member has it, you're 5 times more likely to develop the disorder. So another study that looks at the genetic links between OCD is conducted by Billett. And Billett looked at a meta-analysis of 14 different studies. So a meta-analysis isn't really a study. It's where you get all the results from different studies. So in this case, 14 different studies gathered all the results together and had a look at what they found. And what he found was that monozygotic twins, so identical twins, were 2 times more likely to develop OCD if the other twin had it, compared to dizygotic or non-identical twins. So identical twins 2 times more likely to develop OCD if one of them had it, compared to non-identical twins. So this suggests that there must be a genetic link there, because identical twins are a lot closer in genetics. They come from that one egg. So it suggests that genetics must have a role to play. However, it wasn't 100%. And concordance rates are really what we use to say if one twin has it, the other twin has it. That would be 100%. But that wasn't the case here. It was 2 times more likely. So concordance rates weren't 100% in this study. So it suggests that there must be other things that have a role in developing OCD and this particular disorder. So it can't be completely down to genetics. There must be other factors, maybe social factors, that have an impact on developing the disorder. But it certainly suggests that genetics does play a part. We just mentioned that there might be other factors that play a part in the development of OCD, maybe not just biological factors like genetics. And one particular study by Cromer in 2007 found that over half the patients in his study who had OCD also had one traumatic life experience. So that might be the death of a very close family member, for example, or being involved in a serious car crash, some traumatic life event. And what he found was that those that had more traumatic life events also had increased levels of OCD. So this suggests that potentially genetics might not be the only cause. There might be other factors that aren't biological that might cause OCD as well. So if you remember back to the previous video when we looked at the biological explanations of OCD, we said that serotonin has been found to have a role to play in OCD. And studies have shown that low levels of serotonin increase OCD symptoms. However, certain people have argued that maybe the low levels of serotonin are not down to OCD at all. Maybe they're a result of the depression that people show when they have OCD. If you remember back to the OCD characteristics, we said that depression and low mood are one of the emotional characteristics that OCD sufferers and OCD patients display. So it's a potential that serotonin isn't causing OCD, but rather it's actually a result of the depression that someone's experiencing. So the answer as to whether serotonin plays a role in OCD or not is far from clear. One of the main problems with brain functioning and the worry circuit in OCD is this issue of cause and effect. So, do changes in the brain cause OCD? Is that damaged caudate nucleus the cause of someone's OCD? Or does OCD bring about the changes in someone's brain? So it's really hard to establish cause and effect with biological explanations for OCD, because we don't know if that abnormal brain functioning is causing OCD or if it's an effect of OCD. And it's really hard to actually study this and come up with a definite answer. So this is one of the major issues when we're looking at the biological explanation. We can't establish cause and effect. We don't know if brain functioning is a cause of OCD or if it's an effect of developing the disorder itself. However, some studies have tried to look at changes in brain structure and whether there are differences in the brain of an abnormal person with OCD and a normal person themselves. So Menzies did a study where he had 31 OCD patients, 31 control patients, and he also had 31 first relatives overall. So each person had one first relative involved in the study. And what he did was he did an MRI scan to check their brain. And he found that OCD patients had decreased levels of grey matter in their brain and in that orbitofrontal cortex. And what that means is that it suggests that OCD patients have different brain structures. You don't need to know too much about what the grey matter does here. All you need to know is that there is a difference in the brain of OCD patients in comparison to a healthy, normal person. And that suggests that there must be a biological and neural explanation for OCD because their brains are different. So that provides us with some evidence that OCD must have a neural explanation. The biological explanation itself does have real-world applications, and this is a really important evaluative point you'd want to try and get into your essays. And the real-world application here is that if we do find that there's a gene for OCD, it opens a door for fetal scanning and screening of eggs. So you might have a child, become pregnant, and you get that fetus scanned and screened, and you find out that it's got a gene that causes OCD. So this is a little bit in the future because we don't know if there is a gene yet. But let's say 50 years down the line, you know there's one particular gene or a number of genes that cause OCD. And you tell a parent, right, your child is going to develop OCD. We can be sure of that because we know the genes that cause it. What's going to happen is some people are going to abort that child. And this becomes a sort of socially sensitive issue because it increases the chances for abortions and ethical issues there. So it has got real-world applications, this particular explanation, because it could result in an increase in the level of abortions that occur. And it does develop this socially sensitive issue. If we have a quick recap then on the key points you'll want to be getting across in an essay. There are studies to support a genetic link. We looked at Nestedat study, Billet study. They show that there must be a genetic link for OCD. We looked at environmental risk factors. Potentially, traumatic life events might also be a cause, so it might not all be biological. It's very difficult to establish cause and effect. We don't know if brain functioning causes OCD or if it's an effect of OCD itself. And also, there are real-world applications. Increases in fetal screening, increases in abortions. It brings up a lot of ethical and socially sensitive issues. So these are the key points you want to be getting across in any answer about the evaluation of the biological explanation of OCD.